All right, hi everyone and welcome. This is the second meeting for Core Devs meeting number 38, today on Tuesday, March 10th in the United States. I think Friday, March 11th for some of us on the call. Really excited to have everyone join us today and ready to dive right in. So up first, as always, we're going to give quick updates from all of the implementation teams. As we move into this new meeting format, not all of the implementation teams are joining both calls. So for any teams who are not currently present, I will be giving their updates. And if there are any outstanding questions or larger conversations to be had about those, we will transmit those via the meeting notes async after the call. We'll give very quick updates from the Filecoin Foundation and then want to sort of veer into a larger conversation about all three of the different network upgrades that we have been talking about over the past couple of weeks. So I want to take a few minutes to do a very quick retro and offer time for anyone to give feedback about the recent V15 network upgrade that we just went through. Talk about the current thinking around V16 and provide a quick update on some of the FVM FIPS that are currently open for consideration, and then turn it over to Alex North to talk about early thinking around the V17 timeline and some of the FIPS that he is hoping to put forth for consideration during that upgrade cycle. All right. So that being said, very quickly, do we have anyone on from the Forest team? I don't think so. All right, so I will give updates for both Forest and Fuhan. Nothing really that huge, again, since we did just go through the Snapdeals upgrade. The Forest team is already working pretty in lock and step with the FVM engineering team to prepare for V16. And almost their entire team is hands on deck to refactor the Forest code base in preparation, working on faster syncs and higher test coverage overall. The Fuhan team is currently working with myself and some others at the Filecoin Foundation to rescope their contract. So they're currently looking to pitch some different product differentiations for Fuhan going forward, while simultaneously undergoing an audit of the entire code base with Dudley and working to improve the number of CLI calls available within the module and prepare their miner to be synced and used on mainnet as well. Any questions for Forest or Fuhan that I can relay to the teams after this call? All right. We do have two attendees from the Lotus team. Ayush or Jennifer, do you want to let us know what you're working on?
It's very noisy where we are, so I think we'll let the text on the slide speak for itself, if that's okay. I don't know how about you.
Sure. Also, there's quite a bit of background. I just saw your chat message too. So yeah, I think your updates speak for themselves. Just completed the OSNAP upgrade, also shipped Lotus version 1.15 with retrieval improvements, it looks like. And as everyone I think is very well aware, the Lotus team is working with the FVM team to prepare some of the spec actors and V7 actors as well. So with that, we will give it over then to Stephen and the Venus team.
Okay, yeah, for Venus team, we upgraded to the all the Venus nodes to network version 15, and it works well. After that, we the whole team is focused on the Venus cluster. The Venus cluster is a new component for for storage provider to support the sector management and also for the computing resource management. Which could help the storage provider to share the computing resources among multiple Filecoin nodes to better utilize the resources. We're working on this, and this will be open sourced very soon. Currently, the Venus cluster is in progress. We have done that the sector setting and also the GPU outsourcing, and we had also implemented the MAC function with the Venus cluster. And next week we're working on to implement the Snapdeals on Venus cluster. So this is a new module for storage providers to select and to use this to manage multiple nodes. I would think that this could be delivered perhaps in a few weeks. Just stay tuned. Okay, I think that's all for us. And also for the FM, the team is trying to integrate the FM with the current version. We had done some testing with our private network, and we are also keep a close eye on the building after development. Once it is compliant with version 15, we will integrate that and to test with the mainnet. Okay. Yes.
Great. Thanks, Stephen. Also, I copied over the notes from what you had provided and I shortened them, but I do want to note that under ongoing work, just to be clear, when it says working to implement snap deals, this is in reference to Venus cluster specifically, but I do want to confirm that Venus is synced on version 15 of the network. So that's not a concern and it's not still tested.
Right. Yeah, I mean, this is for the Venus cluster. Yeah, this is a new module. So this is no impact for the current version. Yeah, current Venus. Okay.
Perfect. Great. Any other questions, comments for any of the implementation teams? All right. So updates from the Filecoin Foundation. Very quickly, Dudley is not able to join this version of the call, but there are no outstanding security issues to flag. No news is usually good news. And of course, Dudley is still working with the Sigma Prime team on the Filecoin fuzzer project and working through a full audit of the Fuhan code base. In governance, we have a lot of FIPs, both drafts, PRs open in the repo, as well as those that have been merged into the repo, and many discussions in our discussion forum. We're going to be talking through some of these today, but a few reminders about materials. One, for core devs, we do always recommend that for all of these drafts, you take at least a cursory glance at the material that's there. And although it would be great to get feedback on all of the drafts, we know that that's not always possible, but it is encouraged. So even TPMs, anyone on your team is welcome to take a look. And over the next couple of weeks in particular, there are going to be a lot of very, very detailed drafts, some of which Alex will talk to us about later. And we will be specifically calling attention to those in future meetings. So if you have not had a time to take a look at them, again, highly, highly encourage that you do so. That being said, I recently pushed updates, deep dive on the FIPS process as we've sort of come to agree on it through this last network upgrade cycle. Some of you, I think Alex and Jennifer in particular, have left feedback. So I'll get to that as soon as I can so we can incorporate some of those changes and ask some of those outstanding questions or answer some of them for you. And additionally, I also did reach out to all of the implementation teams over the last week to have a conversation about capacity planning within your teams internally. This was in relation to the contract scoping we're undergoing for Fuhan, but we do now have a very nice document outlining the number of staff that each team has, internal resources at your organizations that you're relying on to help with marketing, communications, product, etc., as well as links to all of your project management resources. So I will reach out one-on-one after this call and offer you access to that. Unfortunately, all of that is collected through Notion, so it is not broadly accessible at the moment. But just an FYI that if we talked about this, there will be follow-up for you to take advantage of. Any questions?
Sorry, Caitlin, do you think I could give a quick update on the Filecoin fuzzer? So it mentioned in security section. Cool. I haven't actually spoken with Dudley in quite some time, so hopefully I'll catch up with him next week. But we've made good progress. We now have the ability to call different functions through Ffi Integration, so foreign function interfaces, calling the Go implementation and the Rust implementation. Our fuzzer has been built, is currently being developed in Rust, just so we can leverage our internal expertise. Lighthouse, the Rust implementation with the Ethereum Consensus client is our baby. So yeah, just we thought we'd leverage the team's expertise in Rust, and that allows us to hopefully be able to spin up arbitrary traits, and sparing you the details, the ability to have structural fuzzing, which should hopefully help surface some interesting behaviors. At the moment, we have about 5-6 fuzzing targets ready to go. So things like block header processing, gossip block, election proof, signed messages, We're catching a couple of crashes, so we will be investigating those internally before knocking on the client team's doors and wasting their precious time. But yeah, the first sort of phase of the project was really trying to get an understanding of the overall design of the fuzzers, and we're happy to report that we're very comfortable with the approach that we've taken. So yeah, stay tuned. A lot more fuzzers will be written up over the coming days, weeks, and hopefully we'll be able to surface some interesting bugs for you all. The one question that I may have, if that's okay for everyone, is whether we can simply essentially lock in certain commits or tags in your repositories just to make sure that we're hitting the exact same version of the state transition functions. So I'm not too sure whether we want to dive into the details here, or if the actual client teams can reach out to me directly, or perhaps coordinate through Dudley. But it's very important for this project that we're hitting the exact same version of the implementations. Obviously, as Caitlin was explaining, there's a bunch of upgrades in the works. I'm not entirely sure if these upgrades have been sort of merged into the stable branches of each client team, or if you're sort of developing this on a separate branch. We have so far chosen to go with the tip of your default branches. Please let us know if we should be targeting something else instead. That's about it. I'm happy to answer any questions people may have on these activities.
Yeah, so I can speak to Lotus and say definitely, yeah, we can work with you to pick a tag. Probably our most recent stable release would be the one to use. And yeah, as Jennifer said, we can talk in Filecoin Slack. There are channels where you can reach all of the implementers simultaneously, which would be good. I have a question, but I don't understand how fuzzers work. They tickle a weird part of my brain. So do you simultaneously target all of the implementations? So do you fuzz a domain of a Filecoin node, and it doesn't matter whether you point it at Lotus or Venus or Forest or whatever, or how does that work?
Great question. So the way it works, we are instrumenting the actual code bases that we target. So we have written a piece of software that effectively calls through foreign function interfaces, so like kind of C links, the Go client and the Rust client. So far, we were only targeting Forest and Lotus, right? This is how we're playing it. So it is white box coverage guided fuzzing, as opposed to sort of black box fuzzing where you're spinning up nodes and hitting them with random traffic. Hopefully that answers part of your question. The other thing to keep in mind, as I said, because we're leveraging Rust and Forest, we will be able to instruct the fuzzing engines to format the actual fuzzing input properly, meaning that we will not be just fuzzing these implementations with random bytes. We will actually be able to, as I said, instruct the fuzzers to parse the actual bytes into sensible, relevant consensus objects when we're hitting the state transition functions. We will also be sort of sending junk so that we try to fuzz effectively the parsing or the unmarshalling functions of each client, but it's very important to reach as many code paths as possible. So we find that structural fuzzing is quite key in that sense. Hopefully that answers it.
It does, yeah. Very excited to see what comes out of this. All kinds
Fingers
of
crossed.
demons you might find. Thanks.
Cheers. Thank you.
Mehdi, I also have a question actually. So you're developing this initially for Forest and Lotus, but I'm not sure how specified the fuzzing, the fuzzing itself actually is. For the Venus team also, they're also written in Golang, and I just messaged Stephen, but I assume they have a lot of, almost identical, if not the same, like CLI calls, for example. Would they also be able to use the Lotus fuzzer test?
The current plan or current agreement that we have with the foundation is to solely focus on the two clients that I mentioned, but we did build this this platform to be sort of modular, and we can in the near future plug in any implementation really. So I think we deemed that Forest and Lotus were at least then the perhaps most mature clients to be able to conduct this this activity, but yeah, certainly open to adding more in the future.
I think I remember you presenting that as part of your roadmap a couple of weeks ago too, the modularity. That's great. I think we should have Dudley make sure to give an update at the next call at least. And if you need any help or support when the fuzzer is live or available for testing, we can be in touch.
So
we can
yeah, just to give a heads up to everyone, obviously we are dealing with a live network with hundreds of millions, billions of dollars worth of value. These activities are usually happening on private repositories. So we will be giving access to the relevant people, but I mean, for everyone sort of listening to this, you may not be able to run the fuzzers yourself for obvious reasons.
Sure, it's a good note. And any other questions then for Mehdi? All right. So as mentioned, and I know we're a small group, so I think this will be a relatively quick conversation, but we did just want to have space for anyone to provide any feedback about the recent version 15 network upgrade. This is the first core devs call that we've had since making the upgrade. And Jennifer was kind enough to provide this really wonderful little graph for us to show that there have actually been some snap deals already made on the network. Additionally, earlier in our first meeting of the day, she made a comment about how a lot of these deals are also being made with verified client data through the Filecoin Plus program, which does make sense. And if anybody is interested in understanding a little bit more about the dynamics of that data in particular, as an aside, we'd be happy to extend invites to the Filecoin Plus governance calls, which do provide a lot of really, really great statistics about the onboarding of certain client data sets into the network as well, which may be interesting as your team sort of think about or continue to run snap deals within your own networks. But that being said, in general, any feedback about timelines, planning, team capacity issues, or anything else you'd like to bring up to the group? All right. If it's okay, I think so. Jennifer and Ayush are in a restaurant right now, so I can just kind of copy through their comments from this morning. They mentioned that their team felt the greatest squeeze when preparing for V15 and sort of getting the Lotus release candidate ready to actually go and transitioning from being on a test network, working through bugs, to actually being ready to release and sync on mainnet with snap deals implemented. I think that was a challenge for a lot of people, but do know that there is an initial test plan that's been released for V16, where there's been quite a bit of priority placed on actually making sure that there's enough time for test networks to be run. And I think Jennifer, last time her and I had spoke, there's about 5 to 6 weeks just dedicated solely to testing with the FVM FIPS on the network. So if that was a concern you also had or an experience that your team struggled with, do know that we're already thinking about ways to improve that going forward. All right. Which of course brings us then to our next network upgrade, which of course we're already thinking about, V16. I did want to provide links, one to that test plan I mentioned. If you'd like to take a look, you're welcome to, as well as a confirmation of the current timeline. We had proposed a timeline that was actually 2 or 3 days earlier than this at the last core devs call, and are hoping that these updated dates will give everyone just a little bit extra time. Again, really trying to focus on making sure that releases are available for testing as long as is needed. And otherwise, if there are no concerns about these details in particular, the only outstanding question is what we should name the network. And it very much appears that Skyer, the Icelandic yogurt, is what we are going to be going with, unless anybody has any strong feelings against it. In addition, as we know, the focus of this network upgrade is really on the FVM, the M1 upgrades that we're trying to make. And I did want to call attention to the sort of set of FVM FIPS that are then going to be considered for this network. There are 3, FIP 30, 31, and 32. And if you'd like to sort of take a deep dive into those 3 FIPs specifically, as well as how they sort of work together, and very particularly how the team has worked on the gas model adjustment for non-programmable FVM. This is the newest FIP, and it's the only one that Raul has not discussed in detail with core devs previously. I would recommend watching the recording from this morning's meeting when it's available, or checking through the core devs meeting notes also when they'll be available, very likely early next week, so that you can make sure that you're up to date with all of the thinking and planning going into these 3 FIPs. Any questions? All right. If you are in the FIPS repo, you'll notice that there's actually a fourth FVM FIP. It's currently unnumbered, so it's FIP NNNN. And this is also an additional gas model adjustment, but it is for the programmable FVM that will not be implemented until the M2 timeline, which will occur later this year. So it will sit open in the repo for a significant amount of time, and it is important to realize that the priority is very much on gas model adjustments for the non-programmable FVM, because again, this is the one that we're hoping to be able to implement as part of V16. Great. And as a final note related to FIPS, sorry, I know this is a lot of information. Again, all of the links and everything will be present in the meeting notes after today's call. We are also newly reconsidering FIP 27, which has not yet been accepted, but which has been in the repo for a couple of months now. This is something that we had talked about when we were initially planning for the V15 network upgrade, and it has to do with changing the deal proposal label type to bytes. It's currently a string. This is one of those things that seems deceptively simple, but was put on hold because it requires some pretty significant architectural changes. But there's been some additional work that's been done because it's believed that this is actually a really important change to make when preparing for the FVM long term. So if you look in the chat, Jennifer shared a link to an updated proposal on this FIP. And we are hoping that we can actually potentially plan for this FIP to be implemented during network V16 as well, although it's expected that the changes that are needed will be relatively simple for implementation teams, and it will not be too much work on anyone's behalf, so it should be a simple addition, so long as there is consensus around prioritizing this. Any questions?
I'm just curious whether client implementers will be implementing their own FVMs. So specifically the the Golang clients. Is the plan to have a Venus implementation of the FVM, and a Lotus implementation of the FVM, or are you guys collaborating on a Golang implementation that will be shared across these two clients?
So I never want to speak with certainty about technical questions. If anyone wants to jump in and answer, you can. It's my understanding that the default is now the built-in REST factors, which everyone is relying upon. And the introduction, cool. Yeah, and the introduction of the WASM runtime is one that everyone takes advantage of through their individual client interfaces.
I see. So the Golang implementations will be effectively calling or making use of the reference FVM implementation through FFI calls. That's my understanding. Client implementers, correct me if I'm wrong, please.
That's exactly right. So only one FVM, only one reference FVM is the plan. Yeah. And so speaking on behalf of Lotus, which is based in Go, yeah, well, we're calling it through FFI. The reason we're calling it the reference FVM and not the FVM is obviously because folks are encouraged to kind of use it as a spec to go and implement their own better versions of the FVM in other languages and so on.
Gotcha. Thanks.
But right, there's only one in development by the folks on this call, let's say.
Very clear. Cheers.
Any other questions? All right. And as an additional note, again, when we talk through FIPS, planning, timelines, et cetera, it's a lot of information. Again, meeting notes from this meeting are important, but beginning this Friday, we're going to begin publishing long form governance updates in the FIPS discussion repo every single week. This is where you'll get updates about new items pushed to the discussion forum, the status of different FIP proposals, whether they're in PR status or whether they've been merged into the repo. And it's also where we'll be able to summarize all of the relevant links for planning documents and current thinking about priorities for FIP implementation. So of course, there will be links to this shared in Slack as always. But if you're hurriedly taking notes or tuning all of this out because it is a lot of information, do know that there will be a lot of reference materials built for you, in particular support of the V16 upgrade, which will probably be here before we all know it. All right, any questions? Again, going once? Great. So with that, we can shift a little bit into talking very generally about V17. This is an upgrade that we're hoping to schedule at the end of the summer. This morning, Lee from the Forest team had asked, whether or not we're going to have enough time, really making sure that we want to be able to implement the FVM and be able to accommodate whatever next changes come so that we can stay on the timeline that we know will be very strict throughout the rest of 2022. But again, I would encourage everyone to take a look at the test plan that was linked for V16. For that upgrade, as well as others going forward, there is a strong priority and emphasis placed on testing. And so it's our hope that although this timeline is still very tentative, there should be more than enough time for everyone to implement things as needed and know that certain FIP implementations will become significantly easier once the FVM does go live. That being said, before we can get to a place where we begin to talk about the specifics of this upgrade, there are still a couple of open questions that have been highlighted on the bottom right corner of the slide. The first is sort of this chicken or the egg question that Jennifer posed this week about whether or not the priority for the first upgrade after the FVM should really be on refactoring system actors to enable eventual programmability of the FVM, or if you should actually implement FVM programmability in that M2 timeline step. So we'll continue to think about this, but I think the thing that's very top of mind for me is this discussion point that Ayush brought up a couple of weeks ago, which is linked at the bottom, and it's how big should a network upgrade be? So there are a lot of FIP proposals that we're already thinking about for V17, which Alex will walk us through in just a second. But again, we'd like to ask everyone to continue to think about and weigh in on this topic. It's a little bit of a more philosophical one than strictly technical, but it's important for us to sort of think about these standards for upgrades so we know how to prioritize FIPs, especially as we expect the number of FIPs in the repo and that backlog to continue to grow over time. Great. And with that, if there are no questions, Alex?
Yeah, I have a question before we move on.
Sure.
So this is the first time I've seen those, well, I've ingested, maybe I've seen them, but the first time I've noticed those dates for a proposed V17 and internalized them. So my commentary is they seem very conservative. Slow is probably the word I would use. I would be hoping we can move towards a world where we are, by the time we launch one network, so by the time we launch networks 16, where we can enter the final testing phases of the subsequent network, so that we can have it live on the network, 2 months later or something. I'm not arguing that we should be compressing testing times at all, but we need to be pipelining our development so that while sort of the code for V16 is frozen and it's going through its various rounds of testnets, by the time that it is released on mainnet, the code for the next version is frozen and it's probably already on early testnets and going through its final calibration net phases. And so that way we still get long testing times, but we can increase the pace a little bit. And as one part of my sort of response to how big a network upgrade should be, if a slow pace of upgrades forces us to upgrade only 4 or 5 times a year, then the answer must be that they are big. And the only way you get to move the answer to make the upgrades smaller and less risky is if you're ready to do more of them. And I think we can do more of them without compressing the testing at all, just by setting the expectation that the code, for one upgrade should be ready by the time the previous one is launched. So this proposed timeline here is sort of freezing the code at June. That's a very long time away from now. I would hope that we can bring that target in a little bit and hence get this upgrade launched certainly prior to August, preferably prior to July as well.
It looks like Ayush, did you want to jump in or?
Yeah, so this is interesting, right? Broadly speaking, I think I agree with Alex, at least that we could get to that world. I don't know that we should get to, but I agree that pipelining these upgrades so that to make them more modular, more parallel, and they're kind of happening at the same time, so that when V16 goes live, we already have V17 baking in early testnets. Sounds good. I think the biggest problem with that is, when I think about trying to achieve that world today, 2 immediate obstacles come to mind. Number one is just resourcing. Speaking on behalf of the Lotus team, I know that would feel difficult for us. We've certainly fallen into a pattern of you you're focused on the one upcoming network upgrade, and then you take a week to breathe, and then you start to think about future ones. That's already changing, given that we're talking about V17 and V18 right now. But I think that's one concern, just in terms of making sure we can do everything we have enough resources for it. The other problem, and honestly the one that I think would jeopardize that idea based on the current world today, is that we're historically not very good at sticking to our timelines. Again, something that we're getting better at, but I would be concerned about the V17 timeline essentially getting continually pushed, because let's say, and I'm just using 17 and 16 as placeholders here, not the specifics of what's in those upgrades, because V16 keeps getting delayed because complications arise or there's scope creep or whatever else happens. These are both solvable problems, and they should be solved, I think. But I do worry that the vision that Alex is describing is a little too far from where we are today. But I'm interested in conversation of moving towards
that. Jennifer, I think if you unmuted, there's quite a bit of feedback. Maybe you could type your response or question in the chat. That's okay. Yeah, I wonder also, to Jennifer's point, rightfully, Stephen, I wonder if you have any thoughts or opinions. The first thing that came to mind to me was the obviously resource needs. I think it was actually our plan that we were going to do this sort of parallel pipelining development work for the V15 and V16, with the initial plan to implement the FVM by the end of March, which we now know is not going to happen. And the reason for that was really because, as Ayush said, it's difficult to stick to timelines, but the reason why are really quite sticky, and they usually have to do with staffing and capacity, especially as we rely on decentralized teams who really kind of have one core group of engineers who may be relied upon to do a lot of help, but then they have 3 or 4 clients that they're responsible for providing updates and work streams to.
Okay, yeah. For Vela's team, currently, I think, yeah, we have the resources, I think, is capable to deal with the FM integration, and also continue to for the Vela's development. But here, I would think the question is that I say that we have actually a lot of development and upgrading on the actors actor itself. That will be I would expect a lot of the things to do with this. But for Velas, it's still kind of integration instead of lots of development by ourselves. So it's kind of good. Based on this, and also generally, I really like we have incremental upgrading for multiple data versions instead of we do it quite big big version upgraded. It will be very hard to handle. So I would think that we still need to plan for multiple milestones, or to have multiple data versions. And I'm not sure what kind of content could put it in, but I would think that is better to have more upgrading more frequently than before. That will help us to control. But in another and also I really hope that we have the FM ready and to have the user programmable FM available. But on the other side, I would think that we should also have our base very concrete. For example, we have these FFPs and here to set pre-configured can be deposit independent, and also to support and also from some others, which is also very important, and also including about the to separate to put the market actors to the higher level instead of in the system actor level. I would think that we may perhaps we should put that be implemented before our last our FM milestone 2 and upgrading because we want to have a better foundation for our system to support smart contract, and we do not to have very big change after we have this announced. We really have the FM ready for the user to write smart contract, and later on we have to upgrade our fundamental level. Fundamental level of our system. So it's kind of complicated. So I would think that we need to think about this very carefully. We need to have more discussion perhaps about this.
Thanks, Stephen. I think this is a great point and a great place to start this discussion. And as usual, I think we will continue to have this discussion over the next couple of meetings. So I'm excited to see how that changes, especially as we're thinking about making sure we have a strong foundation, also understanding how work capacities for FIP inclusion actually changes once the FPM does go live. So with that, and knowing that much of this information is still very changeable and nothing needs to be decided, I wanted to make sure, Alex, you do have plenty of time to discuss the FIPs that you're currently working on. So the floor is yours. Oops. Let me see if I can get my slides back for you all. That was strange. There you go. Okay. Oops, sorry about that. I'm just on one computer with Zoom and it's switching windows, but let me share again.
No worries, thank you.
Yeah, there you go.
Thanks. So hi everyone, including people watching the recording. It's nice. I really appreciate that the new schedule for these meetings permits me to join in person, at least for sort of half of the fun. Now that we're spanning time zones some more, I think I'm looking forward to seeing how this split meeting works. I look forward to reviewing the previous call, and hope that this gives a good opportunity for everyone to get sort of the high definition, high resolution information from all time zones. So yeah, since I haven't been here before, since I guess it must be more than a year ago since I've been on a call with some of the people here, I thought I'd do a brief intro of where the stuff that you're seeing me produce is coming from. So I'm now part of the Protocol Opportunities team, which is a team within Protocol Labs as part of our cryptographic network lab. This is a special team which I'm rather excited to be part of, which contains both researchers and engineers, and so has this capability to go end to end from problem understanding and research, fundamental or very close to applied research, all the way through to product and protocol development. And so, our first, the very first thing we're working on, of course, are very Filecoin focused. The people in this team were responsible for most of the theoretical development behind Filecoin, a large amount of the programming, some Lotus and the actors. And so it's a great capability. And so we're looking to bring this sort of research-heavy protocol development to Filecoin and to other Web3 protocols over time as well. Our near-term goals are the programmability of the FEM. So obviously the FEM enables programmability in the basic sense, but we're talking about programmability of storage and of deals and storage market-related things. Programmability that is specific to Filecoin, as opposed to just porting some DeFi stuff from Ethereum into the FVM. So that's our primary focus. Well, that's sort of half the team's primary focus right now. And we very much look forward to enabling the same kind of explosion of composable building blocks and protocols building on top of each other that DeFi has seen, but with storage-related primitives. Unfortunately, the state machine and the actors for mainnet launch didn't pay much attention at all to this kind of programmability. That wasn't, we knew we didn't have a real VM. We didn't know how long it was going to be until we got one. So it wasn't worth putting too much effort into architecting the APIs for that kind of unrestricted development. But now we are doing that work, and so it's some amount of what could be classed as technical debt, or just shortcuts that we took advantage of because we could in order to get the Filecoin mainnet launched, from which we could then iterate and learn. And part of it is of course, we've genuinely learned new things from the community and from watching Filecoin, the network proceed. And so we have genuinely better ideas now than we could have had back then anyway, which is great. Parts of the other team are also working on things related to retrieval. So retrieval incentives, ways to take metrics of the behavior of nodes and ways to build marketplaces for the retrieval side of the Filecoin network. These are hard problems. It's hard to, there's no obvious theoretical or no obvious construction whereby someone can request data from a provider, and if they don't provide it, that you can prove they didn't provide it, or that if they do provide it, that they can prove they did. And so these are, there's a really interesting protocol development going on here. And as that takes shape, I'm looking forward to that. We're really increasing the value of storage on Filecoin once the retrievability side of it is much more high likelihood. This team also previously worked on snap deals, all the work for snap deals, like the proof upgrade side of it came from this team before it was sort of named as such. I also previously worked on exponential scaling for storage, although that's a proposal that's just on the shelf until we need it. And I also worked on the Fil+ subsidy. That's also deferred because we've had better ideas since then. It's TBA whether after we implement all of these things for programmability, whether or not the Fil+ subsidy is still high value enough to pursue, or becomes a thing that we decide is not worth the effort. Thanks. It's a joy to be working in public, so you can follow along with our work. Things from our brain go pretty much directly into public on the CryptoNet Lab notebook in Notion. That is, you get almost the raw data from there. The ideas that really have merit then get posted into the FIP discussion forum. But if you want to follow along, prior to that stage, then our notebook on Notion is where to look. Thanks. Next slide. Great. All right. So here's the set of proposals that are specifically from that I'm associated with, that are stepping stones towards this wonderful world of fully programmable storage on the FVM. And so I want to leave an opportunity here for Q&A about these. I don't know if there are any questions asked asynchronously that Caitlin's going to pass on. And of course, the discussion forum and the FIP post is a great place to have these discussions as well. But just briefly to motivate these, the first proposal, setting the pre-commit deposit independent of sector content. This is decoupling a piece of some tight coupling between how the storage-powered consensus works and how deal markets work, where the verified power, the quality-adjusted power mechanism depends on the content of sectors. But we don't need to know this at pre-commit. We can set a safe pre-commit deposit amount without knowing what the sector content is, by just setting it to be a safe amount for the maximum value that a provider could put into their sector. This is an opportunity, for simplicity. It's a prerequisite for later things where you're really a much stronger ripping apart of markets and mining. But this is simplicity. We can save gas straight away from this, and we save even more gas later on when we split them apart. The implementation is nearly complete. I'm working with Kuba to finish the implementation. There's going to be zero work from client teams to integrate this. This is strictly a change that happens inside the actors. There is a migration involved. So at the upgrade, we do a state migration, but it's a small one, nothing like the Snapdeals one. But it leaves all the APIs intact. And for almost all providers, we expect that this changes nothing about their operations because they already need to put enough funds in their minor actor to cover the initial pledge. And the pre-commit deposit is still less than the initial pledge after this change. So this is a simplification, a gas change, a gas saving, and a prerequisite for more decoupling later on. Should I run through them all? Let me run through them all so that for time, and then I'll pause for questions for all of them at the end. Supporting contractors, deal clients. This is maybe like the minimum bar. If we were allowed to do absolutely nothing else before enabling user programmability on the FVM, I think we have to support contracts as being able to make deals. Otherwise, they literally can do nothing to do with storage, and there'd be no point having an FVM. So the built-in storage market only supports externally owned accounts, so things with private keys as clients. This change adds an alternate entry point, an alternate flow for entities that cannot make signatures to initiate deal clients, initiate deals with the built-in storage market actor. In the long run, of course, I hope that there'll be many storage market actors and they can do whatever they like in terms of enabling contracts or accounts as clients. But until we have arbitrary, other third-party markets, and of course they'll take time to develop, allowing contracts to make deals with our built-in storage market is sort of what I think is a minimum capability for us to enable. This is a relatively straightforward implementation. We haven't written the code for it yet, but again, Protocol Opportunities team plan to write the code for this. Integration effort for clients is 0 if they don't want to take advantage of the new capability. But if they want to expose endpoints for triggering contracts to make deals, then there might be some new calls to plumb through to CLIs and things like that. Third FIP, I've been through a fantastic journey of understanding the workings and the integration of the Filecoin Plus program with storage mining. The early ideas came out in the Fil Plus subsidy premium proposal, but we've now discovered ways to break that problem up and make it smaller so that we can solve pieces of it at a time. So this decoupling the Filecoin Plus term from storage marketplaces is a great step here. This proposal leaves all of the existing workflows intact, but changes the state representation so that Filecoin Plus data cap allocations and claims on that data cap by providers who are storing the pieces are stored outside of the built-in storage market actor, and so can then be made available to other market actors in the future when they're possible. And as a side effect of that, it decouples the term, the duration in time for which a data cap allocation could be claimed, from the deal term that was made by the built-in storage market. The built-in storage market has a bunch of limitations on the term that you can make a deal for that are not technically limited. Sorry, they're not technically necessary. They're just shortcuts. And so by making this change, we can also enable a verified client to make a data cap allocation for 5 years, say, even though the built-in storage market can't do a 5-year deal. And then have a provider be able to prove that piece and provide that data for up to the life of up to the entire life of a sector, maximum life of a sector. We can also, it's then trivial to extend that beyond 5 years from the Filecoin Plus point of view. There's no reason that we couldn't continually renew a data cap allocation perpetually. On the provider side, they'd have to move the data into a new sector before that original sector expired. But these are all the kind of mechanics of sort of programmable storage that we're trying to enable here. The ability for providers to move their data between sectors while continuing to maintain all of their obligations, decouple their commitments to clients to store data or their commitments to the Filecoin Plus program from the lifetimes of sectors or the particular sectors involved. Enable them to repack their sectors to maximize the usefulness of the space that they're approving, and so on. I've shared this proposal with the Filecoin Plus Notary group already. They generally like it. It solves a bunch of problems that they have. They want currently the Filecoin Plus deals expire after 6 months because there's no way to make one that's longer, and there's no way to extend it. So we have to recertify. The miner has to reseal. It's incredibly inefficient, and of course we lose data that way because the default is for the data to get dropped. So that they are very much on board with the potential that this opens up. So I have a detailed design for this, not yet written up in a FIP, but the FIP for that will be coming soon, along with an implementation. Okay, and the last one is again prefix discussion about an architecture for programmable storage markets. This sort of there's some overlap between these last two here because I designed them in the opposite order to this, but the final one breaks the flow whereby the miner actor consults the built-in storage market actor for permission to seal a sector with particular deals, and it changes it so that the miner actor can seal whatever pieces it likes into some data and then inform a market actor that that data has been committed, and the market actor can rely on the miner. The miner actor code remains built in and trusted. And so any third-party market, including a bounty contract, or a renewal contract, or a replication contract, a data DAO, they can all both use Filecoin Plus data cap and be informed by providers that data has been stored, and get access to events when sectors fault or terminate and so on. And this is sort of the final piece that enables arbitrary storage related applications to be built onto the Filecoin and unlocks the final bits of the flexibility on the provider side to move data around between their sectors, transfer data to other providers, and so on. This last one, I mean, if the Network 17 timeline stays as August, then maybe we've got time to do this last one. Otherwise, if we can bring that timeline in, I'm relatively happy for this final architecture piece to land after M2. But in my goal, today is to get these first three into Network 17, and because that will enable a lot of things to happen. Contracts to deal clients, for example, and these long fill plus terms, which would be a great benefit to the network. And then we can do the final pieces for programmable storage market architecture after that, because there'll be at least some things, a large amount of things, useful storage related programs will be able to be created just after the first three. Okay, that's my spiel. I'll pause for any questions here, or if there are any questions. Oh, sorry, question from Ayush in chat. Let me take that one. Does the second FIP, storage contractors deal clients, deprecate any methods? No, it doesn't. It doesn't change any methods in the existing storage deal workflow. If you do have an externally owned account, then it works just the same. One thing it does change, it adds a new possibility for the off-chain ask and deal exchange protocol. It's optional to support. The old things just keep working, but a node that wanted to support alternative ways of doing deals. I think I'll have to go back and check whether this comes in necessarily with contractors deal clients or only comes in with the Fill Plus piece. But yeah, my goal is for backwards compatible integrations here until the final one. The final one is not backwards compatible, and that will definitely be a change. That's one of the reasons I'm sort of happy to let that slip through past M2 if necessary. The first three, relatively straightforward integrations.
That was great. Thank you so much, Alex. Does anyone have any questions additionally?
I do not have yet the questions for this currently. Yeah, but I would think that because all this change, for me, the last small actually they change the consensus and medicines, especially for some of this, especially for the market side. I would if the time allows, I would think that this should be in the system before the FM milestone 2. That will be perhaps better for us to later to support the smart contracts for long term. And also one question here. Is it possible to provide some kind of retrieval market API support or no standard support? For example, a framework here be prepared for for the future. Okay, I don't know because we really don't have the retrieval market defined very well right now.
Thanks. Thanks. To your first point, I mean, I agree. It would be nice to get all of these before M2. It would be less total work, less total effort would be expended to do all of these before M2, rather than split it up. But it may be that our goal is not to minimize total work, and the goal of getting M2 launched sooner rather than later. We might choose that, even though it means that we do some more total work after M2 gets out. But anyway, that's obviously an ongoing discussion. Retrieval markets, I think currently our ideas are too early for us to know what it is that we want to build in. So my gut feel is that there probably is, in fact, very little that we would need to change to support retrieval markets later on. There are possible pieces like some method to translate between commitments that are SHA hashes and commitments that are Poseidon hashes. So the kind of commitment that is just the root of an IPLD object that someone might actually want to retrieve versus the kind of commitment that is the the data commitment of a sector. They're two different hashing schemes. They're not they're not easy to translate between. And so that kind of thing could be useful to prove that the data that a client wants is in fact the data that's in some sector, and be able to demonstrate that on chain. But overall, I think retrieval is likely to be, in a sense, relatively independent from the storage side of Filecoin. One can imagine retrieval metrics and marketplaces and so on that worked just against an IPFS gateway or centralized computers or something that wasn't Filecoin, just some other storage. A decentralized CDN, it doesn't need to be backed by Filecoin as its root data store. And so many of the protocols that we're working on are not specifically tied to Filecoin in that way, and so wouldn't require anything from Filecoin. That's it. There probably are some things. Maybe there's something about reward distribution. Maybe what we want to use. Maybe we want to start. There'll be policy questions about whether we want to start requiring a certain service level from providers, or that storing a deal implies a commitment to make that data retrievable that the protocol could actually enforce. And in that case, there may be some protocol changes to add enforcement mechanisms, add new pledges or something like that. But it's too early right now to know about what those would be. I see a question from Ayush. Question is, getting rid of Fill Plus, the concept of verified data, something you or others considering? No, absolutely not. We're considering how to make it a better and more useful part of the system. Maybe I could say we're considering ways to incentivize other behavior. So Fill Plus incentivizes the storage of useful data, and we also want to incentivize the retrievability of data. But I don't think there's any there's no notion to remove the concept of Fill Plus from the system. I expect over time, Fill Plus power will come to dominate the storage power over the long run. That out of a total of 100 exabytes of power, maybe there's only 50 exabytes of actual storage behind that, and the other 50 exabytes is power boost from verified data. Maybe the ratio goes even further than that.
I do want to point that we're at the end of the hour, and I want to be respectful of everyone's time. Alex, do you have any final asks or notes for this call, or anyone else, any final notes you think it's important for the group to hear before we presumably pick this up again in future calls as well?
Thanks. Yeah, my only ask is to read these proposals, particularly once they get to FIP draft stage. Earlier on, it's very helpful to read them, because the earlier that your ideas or your challenges come in, the better a solution we can design. But certainly by the time it's in fifth draft, I would really appreciate reading them so that when we come around, this first one I expect to be in last call by this time, in 2 weeks' time. And so we'll be looking to move to accepted at some point, so to justify the final implementation in Rust. And similarly, the earlier we get feedback and the earlier we understand what any challenges are going to be, the better we can spend our implementation work towards this.
Yeah, and we can talk about the last call status offline also, or publicly in a Slack channel. I think the focus right now is going to be on scheduling the FVM ones and doing them as a group just for community communications. And since this is going to be scheduled for implementation for V17, we should have plenty of time, but we can look at the calendar together and figure out a timeline that works best for what you expect for this also. All right, great. All right, well, thanks again, everyone. This is our first iteration of this meeting format. I hope it worked. If you have any feedback, ways that you think it could be more effective, do let me know. Again, many links, many resources always come from these meetings, so do be sure to check them out when they are linked in the different Slack repos and channels. Excuse me, channels, not repos. And I will see you all again in 2 weeks' time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks, bye.